story.
All right, Kurt, I'm going to preface this for you. Joe was like, hey, do you want to bring a story? Because I was prepping some other things, or because you want me to pull one out and said, hey, if you don't mind, I'm riding a high from last night, just sharing stories from 20 years of podcasting and the beginnings and all the different adventures I've had. So I thought, I didn't know what time you get here, when time the same would come up, but I thought, Joe, if you wanted to ask a story of something from 20 years, I've worked with all kind of crazy people. I've done some fun things. I've been on some crazy stages. So that's what the story will be here tonight. So you two can toss out some ideas or ask some questions. What you got?
What's your most embarrassing story?
Oh, most embarrassing story from
in your past 20 years of podcasting.
That was just weird timing on the rip of that paper towel. It sounds like a ripped one. I'm thinking like that wasn't me. That right there is my most.
All right, Shaggy.
Yeah. That's a tough one. Okay. All right. So when I first started podcasting, okay, wait a minute. Random Kid says 20 years. What a boomer. 20 years would be Gen Z at this point, not boomer.
Not even close to boomer.
He's a funny dude. We had a rule in my house. My wife, nobody, of course, in the world understood what podcasting was in 2004 and 2005, except for the people like myself that are forward thinking. It resonated. We just want to get our voice out there. We'll figure it out. And so everybody had their own set of rules that were arbitrary. But in my house, once my wife realized I was going to be doing it a lot and really pushing this thing forward, it's not going to go away. About the time I started bear crawling, she was like, the only rule is I can't talk about our sex life. Because she's like, she first tried to say, I can't talk about her. And like, yeah, you've met me. That ain't going to happen. The whole reason I started bear crawling, and that's the show that I really started running on, was because I needed an outlet. I couldn't talk to my parents. You know, the Hallmark shows, right? They show, hey, Dad, you know, what'd you go through when this happened with you and Mom? I didn't really have that kind of relationship to ask. My best friends weren't even married at the time. So I felt like I had nobody, but I knew I was statistically not alone. So I just needed to dump all my trauma, everything. But I kept some names out of it. I mean, you know, the wife, right? And she went by the Wife-ager for the longest time. Oh, that's a good one, Random Kid. We'll get that up. And she went by the Wife-ager for the longest time. But she said, oh, you can't talk about herself. Okay, that I'm down with. And then I made a rule for myself saying, I will tell a story about the story. Because if it has details that I leave out, it's because it's not my story to share. So like if Kurt and I had gone through something real heavy together and I'm telling something I learned from it, I would say, look, the story is not mine to share. I'm not talking about that, but here's here's the basics you need to understand. Here's what I'm taking out. So the embarrassing part was year or two in to doing the show. At the time, it was a room above the garage that we had. That was my studio. And I remember sitting there and we're doing a special Saturday afternoon hangout with all of my fans, which was like 5 at the time. But we did an afternoon. So England, Ken could be there, who's literally, his name's England Ken, he lives in England, and different people like that could come on, do a live connect. And you got to understand, nowadays we can get on Discord and just hit a button and be together, Skype, Zoom, everything. That was not there. So not only was I doing live, I was able to set up a way for people from other countries for free to connect in and see me and talk to me and hang out. And so my wife joined me for that. And she's sitting here, and the first thing she does is, I don't remember what it embarrassed me so much, because I was always like, that's the rule. We don't talk about it. And I'm not that kind of guy. I don't really share that part of my life. And I don't remember what she said, but the first thing she did was talk about our sex life. Like, instant. I'm like, what? I mean, I got red. I was like, what are you doing? The rule is I can't talk about it. She goes, that's your rule. I'm like, you're never coming on a show again. Not ever. This is so yeah, that it embarrassed the crap out of me. It was crazy.
Sounds fair.
Random Kid says, who is the favorite guest you've ever had on a podcast? I'm gonna say it's Dan Carlin.
I was going to say I could answer that.
Yeah, it's not Kurt Booten.
Yeah, it's me. Yeah.
So who'd you say? You kind of mumbled. Dan who?
Dan, no, I saw Kurt come forward and I just cut my answer off. Some consummate professional, Joe. You can learn from me and Kurt. All right, Kelsey. I don't know how you put up with it.
Exactly.
I don't even have it queued up. Yeah, I almost had you. I can't.
Yeah, you don't even have it queued up. You consummate professional.
Hey, he's supposed to be hitting the buttons now, and he's just want to be like jippity dippity.
All right,
stop with dippity dippity. So the favorite guest I've ever heard on a podcast, Dan Carlin. He is well known for hardcore history. He's well known for a show called Common Sense. He was a writer for the LA Times. Many people will not know his name, but he really is a big founding force in podcasting. And what I loved about him is multiple things. But first was, I just had no idea of what fear was back then. No idea of I can't. Now, sometimes I'll get in my own head and get my own way and go, well, if I ask him, blah, blah, blah. And I'm trying to get back to those days of going, just ask, who cares? And he came across my radar because at the time, he was probably one of the biggest. It'd be like getting Joe Rogan today, okay? He was one of the biggest podcasters, both in the podcast world, but also the real world, because he's one of the few people other than like Leo Laporte, who I've also had on my show, who was big name that was doing podcasting. And Dan Carlin, I just reached out to him. Somebody said one day, he's like, oh, he's a really cool guy. He's doing all this stuff. He's like the king of podcasting. I went, well, that sounds cool. Hey, Mr. Carlin, I did this show called Bear Crawling. This is what I do. At the time it was Bear Crawling Nation. I was doing it by myself, and I had segments. It was an hour-and-a-half show. 30 minutes was one segment of questions with a commercial break, and then a second 30 minutes of a different set of questions, and a third segment. I don't remember what segments were anymore. That was a long time ago. And he was like, yeah, I'm cool. So actually, before we even got to that format, I had him on Bear Crawling was just a random stream of consciousness with some people on it sometimes. It was mostly me. And he's like, I'm down. And so first major interview I ever did minimal research. And I mean, it really, if I could go back and find those episodes and play them, you would see how I walk onto a stage now and talk to celebrities. Now, I still do my research on the celebrities. I'm never going to put myself in a place where I don't know what I'm talking about when I'm doing it for somebody else. But when it's for me, I'm all happy with, I didn't do research on purpose because I want to get to know you. And he just treated me like a consummate professional. He just played with me. He had fun. He engaged, and he remembered me after that. And he came on 2 more times, the last time being the final guest I ever had. Guess what number? It's between 200 and 400. Guess what number I did my final show on?
300.
So you're closest, Joe, but I drove the world crazy because it makes my little chaos brain happy.
299.
298. 298 was my final episode. Because I'm like, yeah, I'm done. I'm moving on to something else. But he was my final guest. And that's when we did the 3 segments. And the third segment was just talking about the journey and me just going, hey, man, moving on to other things, doing this and that. I've really loved. But I got to ask you, kind of like I did last night with you guys. I ask you, why me? Why did you say yes and continue to say yes? And I'm sure you've done a million interviews, especially now at this point. Why did you even remember me? Because I feel like I'm just this clown. And it kind of was on purpose. You think I make a brand out forgetting things now. I was a bit of a fool then. And he just talked about how as creators we're here to help each other. And because I asked, and because I actually have a lot more talent and insight than I think I have. And the rising tide, not the rising tide, waves. He talked about waves because we're going through waves of podcasting. And I've watched you stay on top of that wave every time it's come up and it's crashed and it's taking people out, and you're just on the top of the next wave and the next one. And I feel like you're right there with me. And this guy, man, I wish I remember what year it was. I don't know, probably around 2010. He went to the Pentagon and the White House because they called him in to advise on certain things that they were doing with the military that had to do with his expertise. And he got to share some of that on Common Sense. Common Sense was the only political show I've ever listened to because it's literally what it means. He would talk about the truth between the left, the truth on the right, like bring it more as a moderate towards the middle and really talk about how we need to think about things. And he actually agreed with me because he's the first person ever told on air that I don't believe in voting. I feel like it's wasting. And he had a very good talk about it, but he agreed with this aspect of it before I just burned the house down and freak everybody out. He said, I was right about my vote is my power. And that if I'm not educated, if I don't educate myself and know exactly what I'm doing when I go vote, then it's fine to sit back and not do it. He'd rather people make that choice than to just go vote party. And he's way more eloquent than I am. And I think you can go buy the hardcore history sets now. I mean, when I say buy it, it's worth the money. He does, like when he did World War II, it's about 8 months long, and each episode is about 3 hours, and it's sound effect, and you're just, it's better than any History Channel documentary I've ever heard. He is amazing. So there's that. Shut everybody down. Random kid asks, where to block? Okay, I'll answer that. That's not what I want to pull up. Can I listen to bear crawling anywhere? I don't know yet. Because the way feeds were done then, the way hosting was done, it's not like it's on a website somewhere right now. However, Hugh did mention to me last night the Wayback Machine, so I'm going to try to go and see if I can. And Hugh was my producer for a long time and one of my show partners for a while, so he's going to dig through some old hard drives and see what he may have available. But there's a project I'm going to start working on with that, but we're going to try to collect up a bunch of old shows and put them out. Why did you start podcasting? Because I was in a band, and it's a lot harder to get on the stage as a rock and roll singer than it was as a speaker. I could just do it while I was at work, which I did a lot of, and it just resonated. It was just, I can create, nobody can stop me. No, there's no set history. It's not be an internet radio station. It's not, oh, I got to play 1,000 bars and I've got to get this right thing, and I've got to open for this band. I got to sleep in a van with 5 guys for 6 months. And this plays into for bands, right? Joe's making a big eyes, but when you're trying to get your band off the ground, you have no money. You're doing East Coast tour. You're in a cargo van with your gear and no money for a hotel. My buddies did it all the time. I was like, yeah, I gotta have showers. I gotta have air conditioning. That's not life for me. And that,
well, I mean, even your cousin is on the tour bus all the time. That's not the best.
And now it's a nice tour bus.
It is a nice tour bus, but it's still, but it's still super cramped.
Yeah, you're not wrong. That's right. You went with me to that too. Yes, I did want to be a radio host when I was a kid, random kid. I love that idea of being a DJ, of hosting talk shows. So he's throwing out a lot of great questions here. So I started podcasting because nobody could stop me is an easy answer. And it just landed. It just resonated. I was always built to talk, and now I could just talk about whatever I wanted and nobody could say anything to me. I mean, they could say something, but it's not going to, you can't, I mean, back then, especially, you can't cancel anybody. You can't stop it. It's just, I'll just put it out there. I'm paying for my hosting. There's nothing you can do. And it was just a freedom. Kurt, looks like you had something to say there.
No. I mean, it makes sense back then, because really, even at the beginning, people were doing blogs more than, and blogs were pretty popular, way more than podcasting at the time. And really, I mean, podcasting was just a natural progression from radio. I mean, really, it was a way for people on the internet to be able to do radio in their own way.
Yeah, it was more evergreen radio.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember back during the Live 365 days.
Yep.
That's where Scott got his start as well, and just
Extra Life Radio.
Yeah, and really just watch it, just listening to, and it was cool because it was like this streaming radio program done by just some dude.
Yeah,
and some of them were really entertaining, some of them were really terrible. But the fact that you could actually find that and listen to that pretty much when you wanted to, it was pretty remarkable back then.
And now, funny enough,
no, go for it. I'll ask my
bouncing off of that. I did some Live 365 stuff, and even as I came to podcasting and connecting in with Adam Curry and the No Agenda Network, we were doing live record. I loved live all the time. So we were doing live recordings of just about everything. They actually had a fan who ran a radio station in Iowa or somewhere and actually picked up the stream. So a number of the shows that I got to help on, and that weren't necessarily my shows, I was on a radio station in Iowa somewhere doing this thing. So it's just a really cool thing. What you got, Joe?
I was just gonna say you skipped this one, least favorite guest.
Back to it.
Now, were you afraid because he was actually here in the chat? You just didn't want.
That's a story I didn't tell last night. Is I fired Hugh live on the air because I fired him 2 days before, and that knucklehead didn't get it, and he tried to show up to my show, and so for an hour and a half we went at it where I fired him, no holds barred, every 4-letter word I wanted was out there, and then that was on a Friday. We should do it on Fridays, and then on Tuesday I showed up for the road show. He was like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "Dude, that was that show. That's business. This is this show. This is your show. If you don't want me here, I won't be here." But that was that show. He was okay, and yes, and he's still here. So now I was getting to let's do a quick overview. So you can go to youtube.com/DC. I forget which one.
Media track.
I think it's digital media track. I think it's DC digital media on that one. You won't go wrong by putting in digital media track to find it. If you don't do the slash, if you just Google or YouTube on search DC digital media track, it's there. And long stories are told there. The moniker came from, I think I got my first or second podcast award nomination, and I was still working with two guys, one brain. So of course I celebrate and send them the picture and all that. And something along the lines of, man, Big C, I was going by Big C back then. Big C is just, he is hungry. He is going to be this guy. He is a rock god on the rise. And I went, done and done. And from when I started bear calling, it was the rock god of podcasting. And it just went from there. And so that's where that came from. It's much more entertaining to hear them share it with me. And Phil's like, why did you unleash this shaved Wookiee onto the world? And then we talked about how I picked him up as grown men in Vegas. I literally stood up and held him up in my arms, and we took a picture somewhere. Least favorite guest. I do not remember his name. But our Morning Mon and I were doing Success Freaks. And just like Joe and Kurt and I have talked about, at some point you get to a point with your show, and it's right to try to get other guests on to help grow that reach and that awareness. So they'll tell their audience, hey, I was on Wise and Nerdy and it was amazing. Check them out and that kind of thing, sharing audiences. So with Success Freaks, we've gotten to that point, and now there's a site called Podcast Guest List, but I think it was just Radio Guest List at the time, or there was a site that was separate called Radio Guest List that we signed up for, and we were doing motivational things. So let me tell you, when you talk about people trying to market themselves and get on shows, it's motivational stuff. Oh no, Mando was not a guest queue. Let's not. Oh, Joe, you reminded. Okay, all right, Joe reminded me of something. So, but first, no, this is worse. And you'll know why when I finish the story. This is worse. So my biggest stance on any show I do is you come on as a human being. I know you have a book to push. I know you have a TV show you developed. I know you have XYZ to promote. That's why you're trying to do a million of these shows. However, when you're here with me, you showed audience who you are, because I knew from the get-go the way to be successful is to show your heart and who you are, and people will buy what you're selling. And it's worked. I mean, we've built up the digital media track. I've had a career in digital media for a while just doing that. Unfortunately, like, I never sold my book, which I wrote a book. I never sold my book on my shows. But this guy came on, and I told Morton, I was like, I don't know, man. The way he had us on his show, and he was doing that standard format. If you've ever heard of anybody doing a radio interview or a TV interview, one way or the other, somebody sends a list of questions. So sometimes it's the guest going, I want you to ask me these questions. No, I am not doing that. Go take that. That's so static and dumb. But a lot of people who are just cutting content for content's sake, or that's how they think, that's they do. Sometimes it's the other way. A show will send you, these are the questions we want to ask. You can say no to any of these, just to let you know a heads up. So there's no gotchas, right? I'm not a gotcha kind of guy, and you can't get me. You can ask me a random question. I'll answer honestly, and it might embarrass me. And it might make me feel like crap for a minute, but I'll answer honestly. And so we went on this guy's show. He's like, what's the 10 questions you want me to ask? We're like, no, just talk to us. Here's what we do. Here's some bullet points of what we do. And he didn't know how to function. It was kind of boring. I did it in my car, waiting to go pick up a Nintendo Wii U. Maybe I think it was when the Wii U came out. The Wii, one of those two. I had pre-ordered it. I was going to pick it up, and I got there early, and I did the show from my car in the parking lot, waiting for it to Best Buy to open or whatever. But when this guy came on our show, our whole thing with Success Freaks is it's the other side of live, right? It is we're sharing our hearts, we're helping people. We're not afraid to disagree, but we try to find middle ground together. We try to see different perspectives. And this guy just wanted to come in and be clickbait. That wasn't a term then, but he wanted to be human clickbait and like throw out, oh man, I don't remember who was running in politics, but he just kept trying to like, no, we don't do politics, you know, and I would ask a question and we're doing it live. And just like now, I had multiple screens. And at some point in the show, I got so mad. You see me just do this and pick up my controller on camera and just start playing a game. And I messaged Morning in like the situation where we have a private chat. I messaged Morning and went, you handle it. Get him off the show. I'm done. And I just sat there and because he just wouldn't listen. He just kept trying to push his book, trying to push politics, trying to push all this divisive crap. And nowadays I'm going to play with you guys. Okay. But nowadays we're like, yep, nope. Hey, we're good. I'm sorry that he did that to our audience and we're not going to have him back. You know, we just kick him off like I just kicked Kurt off for the show. But yeah, that was the worst. Second was, I'll say it. I have nothing to lose. Early days of Pokemon Go podcast, we were doing the same thing, reaching out to other content creators. And a guy named Bagel Nude come on, and I don't know what energy drink he infused in his veins before he came on, but he was just like, and me and Joe were like, oh my god, this is the worst show we've
talking
ever done.
Over us, and
it was so bad.
Well, and half the stuff he said about the game was wrong.
Oh yeah. And Joe kept correcting him. I'm like, that's not even, I mean, my shtick is to get it wrong but be funny. You're being serious. It was crazy, man.
So you're saying his situational awareness really wasn't quite there.
No, it wasn't. And
he really wasn't.
I hate to bash on the guy, but
he got kind of kicked from every creator Pokemon group out there.
Yeah, and I tried listening to his podcast as well, but what he tried to do was set up a Yeti mic with an omnidirectional setup because him and his host shared the same mic between them on a table. And so
if you do it right, that can be done easily.
It can.
But he didn't do it right.
Most people don't.
Yeah.
It was not the Yeti mic is a great starter mic. I mean it was at the time. We'll go with that. Nowadays there's a lot better options. Yeah. But yeah, no, he was not using it how it should be used.
So I'm gonna throw it to Kurt. Go ahead and roll the dice, Joe. We'll finish up with Kurt. I have a story to tell if you don't have a question. Do you have a question about any of those days?
So the only question that I had is, did you do any merchandising back then?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
I got
Randy was showing off shirts and stuff.
Yeah, I had, before we end the show, I'll share. I had some pictures set up for last night. Before we end the show, I'll pull up the pictures. I had posters that I'm still proud of to this day because there was a mutual fan of two guys and us that worked in a print shop. He goes, send me your picture. I'll print the stuff and you just pay shipping. And so I had actually today, August 8th, 2009, I had my 100th episode party where I said, you know what? And this is a world where people didn't do this. I mean, I was way have everything everywhere. I just thought, why not? I'm like, I'm going to have a party at my house. Everybody's invited who listens to this show. Here's my address. Here's where I live. Here's the time of the party. Just come on. And thought nobody will come. Maybe like Hugh couldn't make it down because he was in Rhode Island and at the time it just didn't work out. Two guys from Washington were able to get off, but there were people who took their vacation days, got on a plane, and came to my freaking bought hotel rooms and came to my house for this party. I have some pictures I'll share of that. And yeah, we gave out shirts to everybody. I had posters I signed for everybody because I'm that guy. I just went and pre-signed them before anybody came so they wouldn't have to ask because they wouldn't ask. Yeah, man.
As long as you recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah, I still have.
Wait. Did you sign it Big C?
Probably. Yeah, probably. That was though I thought I was Big C, the rock god of podcasting at that time.
So,
but now it changed.
So I had actually a secondary question.
Okay.
Because I did a little Googling. Because I'm a good little Googler. Was there an aspect of Bear Crawling Nation called The Road Show?
Yeah, that was with Hugh. Yeah. Yeah, and we had a thong. We had a thong that we sold.
Yeah, okay. All right. There may or may not be episodes that are out there.
Oh, yeah. No, the Road Show still has stuff out there for sure.
Yeah.
Hugh was smarter than I was and kept some more archives up. I've always been, and to my detriment, I've always been an in the now kind of guy. Like I do it now. I don't look back. I feel like say I've had 14 failed shows or whatever the number is. I retired shows. Like I use them for a time. I grew into a different space. I feel good about what I did. I retired them. They didn't fail. I just went, I'm moving on to something different. And but Hugh, for the longest time, actually, there's an archive of recorded road shows that he did after. I forget why we ended up stopped working on that show together because my life changed. It wasn't a fallout or anything. And he went on with another friend of his, and they've recorded a ton of episodes that just never got posted. I don't know how many hours of recordings he has with his friend that they did that. But yeah, I wasn't going to name her, all right, Kelly. I know her name, but yeah. And we totally did the road show as a goof. And people actually liked it. It really was this. We called it the road show because I wanted to talk to somebody. The car I drove didn't have a radio or anything in it, but I had a cell phone and I had a Bluetooth headset. And I wanted to be entertained on my ride home. Hugh had no life, so he was at home doing nothing. So I'm like, hey, entertain me. And he goes, hey, do you want me to record this? I'm like, why not? And we just had this free conscious thinking, talking about whatever BS thing. There was literally no topics to it. It's just whatever's going on today in our minds. And we did my hour ride home. And in fact, there's some episodes where I ended up being at work late. So I used the work phone and I make jokes about whoever the IT guy is who's listening back to the work recordings. You're welcome. But yeah, the road show is out there. Is it hugh4ri.com or is that where you found it or where'd you find it? It was under Bear Crawling Nation, the Blogspot blog. Wow. Did you hit play to make sure they even still worked?
No, I could because I don't care. But it appears that you used to post on Ustream.
Oh yeah, that we were there as one of the first. That was one of our first hosting.
Was that before platforms. Or after you went to the shall we say softcore website called Stick'em?
Oh no, it was. I don't remember if it was before or after. It'd be awesome. But Stick Cam, thank you very much.
Oh yeah, okay.
We were right in between all the naked cam girls, and I got an audience. I don't know if it's the audience I wanted, but I was doing anything I could. I was on Gizmo, was one of the platforms that we used. Gizmodo. What? Oh man, Hugh mentioned it last night. I don't remember the name of it. I was like, oh yeah, I remember. We were on Justin TV before it became Twitch TV. Live stream before it was Ustream before it became live stream, which is a company now. Yeah, I was on. I did not get. No, you're right. It was a softcore porn site, but it was free and I could put out video and people could watch live. Yeah. And I dug it. As Joe said, that's probably my next tattoo. My life is rated R. I go where I can go. Hugh mentioned how about the time you smashed a wireless mouse live? Project Gizmo before Skype. We were doing live connections. Yes. I was telling actually my team about that today because I get funny when I get mad now because I don't like the rage and what it was doing to me. But Kurt, Joe, you get, you're working on a project, you're doing something, and your hard drive melts down or something else happens. I don't remember exactly what happened, but something went wrong. But it didn't affect my recording somehow, or I got something back up. I swapped. I don't know what I did, but yeah, I'm up in that same upstairs studio, and I have a wireless device, and I'm at a wireless mic, and I'm just pacing and talk, and I chunk that thing. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs about how raging I am, and I chunk that thing across the room, and it shatters. I'm like, rah, 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 rah. Oh, bleep. I just broke my mouse. And most downloaded episode at the time ever. Until Evan and I got into like year 2 of FDH, that record stood. I mean, it was people who never ever listened to the show again downloaded that episode because their friend says, "Oh my God, this dude's hilarious. He loses his crap on air." And they would comment, "Oh my God, that was so funny." And then not download any other episodes. So I had like thousands of downloads for me smashing this wireless mouse and nothing else on that show. Then went back to like 20. I was like, "Oh, you're killing me." I got some other stories, but yeah, let's go ahead and not make this about me all night. But I love sharing these. I love sharing that journey. Like when I asked Kurt about his program, I love hearing those things about your journey with the game show. So I like being able to share that stuff. It's fun.